Welcome back to McCarthy Performance. We'll be putting the short block of the LS together today. It's all been cleaned and all set to go, so we'll get going on it. We have the crank set in the block. I'm going to set up the studs to torque them up, and this is how I do it. Seeing how the newer studs have got a hex on the top, what I do is I put the wrench on it. Okay, that stud's all the way to the bottom. I'll back it off 3/4 of a turn, half a turn. Draw it up tight so the stud don't work its way back down at the bottom of the threads. We don't want it to deadhead, so right there. Get it snugged. You don't ever want the stud to bottom out on the bottom of the threads. So Okay, so we're getting ready to put the bearings in the engine, and I have the clearances figured out. And what I'm doing is I'm going through and I'm checking to make sure that this tang here that registers in the rod fits in the rod correctly and that it's not holding the bearing out of the housing. Now, you know, when you recondition a rod, if you're taking a lot off of it, you'll want to open that up. Sometimes the bearing manufacturer, when they roll that notch in there, it doesn't register cleanly as it could in there. So you have a choice. You can either widen this out and or thin this out a little bit. Now this is for a location point. That's the only thing that does is it holds the bearing in a position, so when the rod's tightened up, it holds it in place. You could theoretically take that right off the bearing if you wanted to. So if you have a problem with these, you can take a needle file like this here, and this file here has only got teeth on the side of the file, so you can hold it up alongside here, and you can file the tang without destroying or affecting the back shell of the bearing. You know, you really need to check them all. You should get in the habit of doing that, especially with an aftermarket rod. And you really should make sure that the position, these are H bearings, but they're not narrowed, they're chamfered. You always want to make sure that chamfered edge is facing the radius of the crank. That's where it should be, and that there's plenty of clearance in this chamfered area for the radius of the crank. Of course, the race cranks have a bigger fillet area on them, so therefore you either run a narrowed bearing or you run a chamfered bearing like this one is. These are ACLs, they're still chamfered. So that's it on that. You know, you also can use a stone on these. I've done it different ways. Some of these on this set of bearings look good, and some of them are a little bit thick. So what I'm going to do is thin them out a little bit, hit them with a file on the side. So I've taken the bearing and I've filed a little bit on the tang. Let's see if you can see that. I just thinned it out a little bit, and it fits in there. It's more crisper. The line, when they stamped it, it's kind of round. It was getting held up. Now, you know, you could probably break the edge of the notch out of the rod, but it only takes a couple seconds to do that, and I'm just crisping it up. I'm not trying to take it off or anything. I still want the location available there. I've just thinned it out a little bit, and then if you put the bearing in the rod, usually if you hold it up to the light, you want to make sure that you're not going to see daylight through here. Now there's going to be a certain amount of crush that's going to push down on this, but you don't want that tang holding up the bearing there. Now this area here, basically we call it the 9 and 3 position of the bearing. That has got built-in clearance that's more than your 12 and your 6. But you don't want the rod hanging up out of the shell. You don't want, let's back up. You don't want the shell of the bearing hanging out of the rod housing. So we'll keep going, and I just thought I'd mention that. If you don't know, now you do. Okay, so we didn't know the history of the bolts because this is a used race engine. So on a situation like this, I put new rod bolts in them. Of course, I touched up the rods, put new rod bolts in them. I always cycle the bolts a minimum of 4 times. What that allows the bolt to do is it also burnishes it into the rod. And you know, if you torque it up on this one, I won't, maybe I'll do it on the next one. But if you torque it up and you break it loose the first time, you're going to go a little further the second time, and usually go a little bit further the third time. And that's removing some of the friction and the material as it finds its home, so to speak. So break this one loose. And we'll you know, that's the thing about that ARP. So we're putting the last piston in on this side, this bank, using a band clamp. Always make sure that all your rings, grooves aren't hanging out here, you know, your end gaps. And squeeze the band down, use plenty of oil, give her a couple light taps, and make sure that the band is all the way down to the bottom of the face of the block. You don't have to slam it, just give it a couple light taps. These have Napier second rings. If you slam them real hard, you can break the ring, and then you won't have much fun. So there we go. Want to go over a couple things. You always want to make sure your orientation of your rings is correct, and you want to make sure that the oil ring spacer and the oil ring rails are free and they're not binding or hanging out. When you squeeze the ring compressor on there, if something's hanging out, you can screw it up. And you always want to make sure that the radial depth is good. Of course, this has already been checked because I ordered the rings for this piston, but you always want to make sure that the radial depth is correct. And that's just the width of the ring and the groove of the ring. You want to make sure that it's always flush at least, or a little bit behind it. So everything's good. We'll put this one down, and that'll be that. So this is going to probably finish up on this video. I don't know if I'm going to have a video of putting the heads on it. Of course, I'll be degreeing the cam and checking pushrod length and rocker arm geometry. Probably be doing that later on in the week. Don't know if I'll make a video of it or not. A little bit under the weather today. Thank you for watching. If you like, hit the like. If you don't like, don't hit nothing. Subscribe if you get any enjoyment out of this. Thank you.